Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Average Jocks Hockey Podcast. This week, we welcome Jamie McLennan, former NHL goalie. He's a TSN analyst, and he's a host of Overdrive on TSN Radio 1050.
Hi, Jamie, and welcome. We're glad to have you on the podcast. We know time sensitive this week, so we will jump right into it. Last week, we got into a bit of a debate about Jonathan Huberdeau and kind of his slow start and then having the injury and being off a few games. He got a goal last night, but my question to you is, playing in both the Canadian and American markets, is there an added pressure coming to Canada? Like, is there, you played in Calgary specifically, is there that pressure? Like, do you think that that's part of the factor of him getting off to a slower start?
Okay, so two things to unpack there. I don't think they correlate the pressure of him getting off to a slower start. Like, yes, there's pressure playing in a Canadian city, but I'm not of the belief that Huberdeau has a slow start because he's worried about what people are saying about him in the media or on Twitter. When you look at it, he had a career year last year. It's 115 points. Was he going to get that again this year? I don't know. Probably not. But, that being said, he's had a slow start. People forget that it takes time to settle into a new environment. This guy's whole pro hockey career, all he's known is one organization, pretty much, one or two line mates in Barkov and, driving the power play there. And you go into we'll call it, I don't want to say non-traditional, but you go to a Florida market. I played for the Panthers. Certainly passionate fans, but nothing compares to playing in the fishbowl in Canada. So there is added pressure, not from the fans and the organization and all of that, and the media. It's from what you put on yourself too to adapt to a new organization. So I always try and temper expectations and say, give me 20 games and see once he settles into systems, new coach, new city, new everything. Keep in mind, this guy's life has been turned upside down. He got a phone call one night going, hey, we traded you. I don't even know if he expected that or not. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, I think there is, to answer your question in two parts, yes, there is a different type of pressure in Canada, expectations, all of that, because, everyone in Canada is hockey fans. They certainly are educated. They have high expectations. He signs an 8-year extension with a boatload of money as well. And with that comes the expectations. Hey, there's 115 points every year right there. That's the guy. You just signed that deal. He doesn't achieve that, but he still has to settle in, and new coach, new system, everything. So there is pressure there, but I don't think they're tied together. It's more about him settling into a new environment.
Mm-hmm. He's too good of a player to continue slumping like that. I mean, Elias Lindholm was another one that had a slow start, and I think he put up 3 points last night. So hopefully that's the start of something getting going in Calgary, because I had them pegged going all the way to the Cup final.
Yeah, and you know what? The way that they're built, like, I say this, regular season's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So, yeah, you can judge on November 15th, November 14th what things look like. But, let's see what they look like mid-March, mid-April, and then deep into the playoffs. I like the way they're built. They got a great goaltender. They've got a deep defensive core when they're healthy. They're missing a guy like Shillington, who's on a personal leave. Tanev has been banged up in and out of the lineup. Uyghur got checked on last night. And then you add, you take two key components in Gaudreau and Tkachuk out of there. You add in Kadri and Huberdeau. In the long term, I think they're better off, but it takes time to settle in and adjust. And plus the growth of guys like Mangiapane, Dubé, younger players pushing through. I think they're going to be fine, but, first 5-6 weeks has been very inconsistent for them.
Mm-hmm. So Thatcher Demko, we'll move on and still stay in the West, but last year almost, in I would say the top 5 elite goaltenders in the league, to night and day Jekyll Hyde situation this season. I think his goals against average is about 4 now. And it's all like you're looking at a goaltender. I find, like, I played goalie in in hockey, and it was like fighting the puck almost, watching him play the last few weeks of not trusting himself or his positioning. And I don't think the team, like especially the defense, hasn't changed that much in front of him. What do you think's going on in Thatcher's head, or what's translating onto the ice that's we're seeing such a difference in player?
Well, I'll give you an example. I think they're a high event team. So yeah, they can score. I want to check. I think they're like top 10 in goals for this year. I did a Vancouver game the other night. But for example, I was sitting there watching the game against Boston the other night, I think Sunday night. In the first period, they gave up 9 high quality chances. Okay, so take your pick. Take your pick of goaltenders, whether it's Hellebuck, Vasilevsky, Shesterkin, Sorkin, Demko, Markstrom. Like that stuff wears on you. So I think they're a high event team, period. So does Demko have to play better? 100%. I'm not trying to defend the goaltender here, but I think they go hand in hand, where that defensive core, especially on the right side, they've had the injuries to Poolman. Tyler Myers has been inconsistent. I mean, you look at that group, Oliver Ekman-Larsson is kind of trying to settle back in as a really good player, but it's Hughes. And then you've got some guys that are still trying to find their way. And then the forwards, I mean, yes, like Garland had a slow start. You've got Pedersen and Miller that still are producing points, but Brock Besser, trying to find goals. That's a guy who's had hand injury. He's been in and out of the lineup. Like they're still trying to find the right mix. But I think if I had to term, and this ties directly to Thatcher Demko, that team could be one of the most inconsistent teams I've seen this season and watched quite a bit as to. I have no idea what you're going to get from them. Like I'm talking period in, period out, like not game in, game out. Like they, how many blown leads that they've had when they've been up 4-1 and all of a sudden they lose the game. You're like, what the hell's going on here? So, but it all starts in net, because I've said this before and I'm going to be bullish with this. At some point in his career, Thatcher Demko's going to win a Vezina. I think he's that talented.
Yeah.
But we do see guys stub their toe. Connor Hellebuck stubbed his toe last season, and all of a sudden they miss the playoffs. Winnipeg hasn't changed that much. The difference is Hellebuck's playing really well this season, whereas last year he was inconsistent. So a lot of times, and I won't take credit for this, I work with a guy named Jeff O'Neill. O-Dog always says to me, he goes, a great goaltender can save a lot of things. Guy can make 40 saves, and you've played terrible in your own zone, but the goalie stands on his head. There's no video the next day you won, right? But if the goalie's average at night and you give up 6 goals, everyone's going into the video room and looking at the mistakes you laid out in front of the goaltender. So it's hand in hand. Certainly Demko can be better, but the team has to be better in front of him as well.
So does a team, like you said, Vancouver's inconsistency, does that fall on the players, or is this, like, as I know Bruce Boudreau is taking a lot of heat, and he made some controversial comments about the team earlier this season, calling them mentally weak, and just things don't seem to be clicking. Like, does this fall on the players? Is this Bruce? Is this solely goaltending?
I think it's a combination of everything, but it's easy to go, okay, well, it's the coach. Well, you just fired a coach, 6 months ago? And, so you go from Travis Green to Bruce Boudreau. And Travis Green was a structured coach and to me had that group at times playing very well. Bruce Boudreau takes over last year. It's a new coach. It's a new coach bump. They go on a run. They come up short, I think, 5 points for the playoffs. But that was is that fool's gold? Is that, what is that team? Okay, you're 5 points out of the playoffs last year. Like, are you going to build on that? Are you the team that you were in the first half or the second half? Because a lot of it is star power. Pedersen, Besser, all of those guys, Hughes, Demko, all the core of the group started slow last year. And really, they replaced the coach. Well, starting slow again this year, you're going to replace the coach? Maybe the players have to take some responsibility of that. So it goes hand in hand. Yes, there's been some questions about Boudreau's systematic style. or lack thereof. So, the coach has to own it, but really the players are the guys that go out. You're like a parent. You send your kids, out to play hockey, off to school. You try and prepare them as best as you can, but ultimately they've got to live the life, play the game, all of that type of stuff. So
Yeah.
I think the players have to own a lot of that because they're the ones that played wildly inconsistent.
So I know the other night Thatcher lost his temper a bit, and I mean a lot of goalies tend to do with Brendan Gallagher near the net. Like, I know when I played and there was, a bit of a scrum, you're skating away, you're kind of getting out of that. The fact that Thatcher inserted himself in that and was willing to kind of mix things up, does that give an extra jolt to the team compared to if, the defenseman comes in and defends the goalie or a forward or whatever? The fact that Demko himself was like, hey, come on, I'm getting in this. Like, does that give a little extra?
Yeah, watching that game live, you see Gallagher is a guy who's not going to stop short anytime in that blue paint. He's going to dig in.
Mm-hmm.
Demko had enough. That might have been a boiling over point for him going, you know what, enough is enough. This guy's been in my crease all night. Things haven't gone my way. I think the guys, a lot of times there are moments on the ice, we call it galvanizing moments, where it's like somebody who maybe steps out of their comfort zone. You don't want to see a goalie fighting. Like, they're not, they're so rare. And especially, you don't want to see your starting goaltender and kind of your bread and butter involved in anything. If anything, I think that would rattle the group because the guys are like, hey, he doesn't go near any confrontation. You don't allow that. That's up to the D to make sure that Gallagher doesn't get there. Or if he gets there, you clean him out. Mm-hmm. So I didn't mind it, Demko getting involved. I like guys showing emotions because it's I don't want to say it's rare, but we see how many times have we watched games this year where it's like a no-hitter, very skilled, very fast, but it's like, okay, it's a Tuesday night and guys are playing well, but it's kind of, there's no real like secondary emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's other games. I watched Ottawa, Philadelphia play the other day, and it was like a playoff game for something. Both teams are really hungry for a win, and there was a couple fights. And I'm not advocating for fighting. I'm advocating for emotion within the game. And Demko showing that. I was fine with it, but you don't want to see it too often because, to be honest, like I say, Demko's a star. You don't want him near that type of confrontation. So I think the guys would want to step in and not have him do that.
Personally, I love the emotion. I mean, you were a goaltender that wasn't shy of showing emotion for sure. There's a couple plays in mind throughout your career that definitely you showed a lot of emotion. The Detroit series with Franzen, for example, but that's another player that kind of like Gallagher wasn't shy of standing in front of the net. But I like that. I think you hit the nail on the head where it's such a fast speed game now, and it's all about kind of your high end players. And now instead of being top 6 heavy, it's really top 9 heavy, where all first 3 lines are really high scoring on most teams. So showing emotion, I think you hit the nail on the head there, and it's more about character now in teams that have that high talent, like I think Vancouver does. Even adding Kuzmenko and locking up Miller to that long-term contract. I think they got a great young team coming up.
I do too. It's just they've got some decisions to make, and it was interesting for Jimmy Rutherford's comments saying that road trip will kind of dictate what direction they head. Kuzmenko's a good young player, but he's still finding his way. He's still finding his way at the National Hockey League level. So it looks good on the power play. He slides into that bumper position, gets available on the back door, the right-handed shot, they fire at his stick. But it's the transition to play every night in the National Hockey League. It's hard to do. That's where you expect guys like Miller. I mean, Horvat's had an unbelievable start, but going back to what do you do with him? He's a pending unrestricted free agent. You've already signed Miller to a massive deal. You've got Connor Garland, who is not playing well. Like, he's a guy that I thought they expected for be kind of that secondary scoring, really hard to play against. And he's, watching him the other night, he's in and out of the game. Besser's still trying to find a groove. Pedersen, I watched them play against Toronto the other night, and they had a couple power play looks, and their power play is really good. But Pedersen was hesitant to shoot the puck, which I thought was weird because he's a shooter. So they've got high end talent, but they've also got decisions to make. Where is it high enough and that core is strong enough to get them to the next level, to win rounds, to go deep into the playoffs, or are they just good enough to battle for a playoff position? And I see out of Vancouver all the time, we'll call it Vancouver Twitter, they're some of them are saying, well, rebuild because that's not a cup contending team. And others are saying, well, if you're going to go all in and continue to add pieces. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there, because Jimmy Rutherford, as we all know, is not a guy who sits back. He's not shy to be proactive.
Yeah, and he always tends. I mean, I remember his tenure in Pittsburgh. He pulled the trigger pretty early on in the season on some trades. I remember the Jeff Carter one specifically. He brought him in, and he's been great in Pittsburgh. But like you said about the road trip thing, like, is it too early based on the season, like, to pull the trigger on, like, a Horvat trade just because he is an unrestricted free agent and you want to maximize your return with how well Horvat's playing? Like, do you cash in on that right away, try and get a couple pieces that may fill in that top six role and hope that your core is better after that? To me, it's tough. You're trading a captain, you're trading probably one of your longer tenured Canucks on the team now. That really is, I would say, the center of that core. This early on in a season, whenever you can turn it around, you've seen the type of season you had last year. Like, it makes me nervous. I'm not a Canucks fan, but for that franchise, making a decision like that seems like it could be rash.
Well, it might be rash. They've played 16 games, so you hit that 20 game mark. Now all of a sudden you're at that American Thanksgiving. There's a lot of managers, and manager meetings, I think, are next week.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of managers that kind of figure out what their team is or have an idea of what their team is at that point. So if Rutherford gets to that point and he still has massive question marks, then he's going to probably go on instinct as to go, I think they can either sort it out, and I believe in this group, or I've seen enough of this group, and I'm not believing that they can get to that next level. So I am going to maximize pieces that need to be moved. I thought his comments were quite damning, almost saying like nobody's safe in that dressing room, and we'll see how this shapes out. So the players can control that. It comes back to, go on a 5 or 7, get 10 wins out of 12. We're not talking about that anymore. You've gotten past it, but easier said than done. I still think they give up too much defensively. They can score, but unless you're outscoring your issues, eventually they're going to come back to bite you.
You brought up the GM meetings next week in Florida. Like, I just find the whole Bettman ban on Mayu Miller to be kind of strange, and more on the Mayu side, just because whenever Mayu was drafted, it went through a similar kind of heated critique from the media, from fans, from the victims, and then it kind of went quiet for a while, and you didn't hear anything. Going through rehab, going through this, going through that. He's taking the steps necessary to make amends. And then, Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon sign him this offseason, and nothing said. Went to Montreal camp. He looked very well. Goes back to the OHL. He's doing great there. And then, once the whole Miller thing happens, when Boston signed him and all that ordeal that's been going on, and then it comes out, Bettman says, oh yeah, Logan Mailloux also can't play in the NHL. He's also banned until I say feel that he's done enough to make up.
Right.
If Miller does not sign in Boston, do you think this ban happens? Like, do you think that was already in place? That's understanding. Like, to me, Kent Hughes and Gordon have done such a culture change in Montreal that this would have never, I don't feel like they would have signed him if it was under the understanding of he may not be able to play.
Yeah, I see where you're coming. I the only thing I would say with this is you have to treat every case individually because, again, I care first and foremost about the victims here.
100%.
Okay? And I'll be honest, like I was disgusted seeing the stuff with the Miller, like the mom, releasing that statement. It actually was disgusting. And not that what Logan Mailloux did wasn't bad as well. That was bad, but like that was a separate incident, and it seems like it was not one-off, but it was a one incident, a picture of, again, I care about the victim, but it was clear to me, and then, from what I understand, you guys can weigh in too, it's Montreal drafted him and laid out a path and said, we're going to hold your hand and help you become a better man. We're going to help you, rehabilitate, if you're a kid that's asking for, and let's keep in mind, if you're a young guy who's made a mistake and asking for forgiveness, asking to be a better person, and you want to be a role model, Montreal has said, we're going to clear a path for you to do that. And it's going to take time. You're going to have to go through the steps. And believe me, every time he would score in junior and have a big game, he'd be trending on Twitter. And the debate would come up. There he is. There's Mailloux. So until he was going to be, if he got to a point of making the NHL, I think the league would weigh in and go, okay, has he done the necessary steps? Has he shown not only remorse, but shown that he can be a good role model? We're trying to have a brand here that has been damaged by several things, not just Logan Mailloux's situation. There's the Kyle Beach. There's a laundry list of things right now that I think the league is working on and needs to work on, just like in society, to be cleaned up. The Mitchell Miller situation, what it's done is it's kind of torn the scab off again. And now you're suddenly going, okay, well, it's Mitchell Miller. Well, and people, Boston fans are going, well, look at Montreal, look at that guy, and look at her. Instead of treating it like, okay, Montreal, Logan Mailloux is working on himself. I don't, maybe Bettman had to say that. I'm not privy to the conversations behind the scenes, but bottom line is my understanding, again, from the outside, I'm sure you guys get the same information. He's working on himself. The Montreal Canadiens are trying to give him a path to become a better young man. I'm not, getting this information from the Mitchell Miller situation. I don't know. I'm not seeing a lot of evidence of a clear path to redemption here. Like for him, and this wasn't a one-off situation. This sounds like, again, reading the letter and reading the statements and stuff, like it was years of abuse and not, not remorse. Like I try to be a forgiving people. I think I live by the saying, like, you disarm people with the truth. If you make a mistake, you say, I'm sorry, I screwed up. How do I be better? I didn't get that out of the Miller camp. And I just, that's where I think it's what's happened is, that's why I guess it's a long answer. I apologize, but
no,
I'm trying not to compare the two and, you throw in others. I'm looking at the Miller situation as different than the Mailloux situation, different than Hockey Canada's situation, different than, because all of them have victims involved. All of them have many layers and way more layers than we know in the public. So I try to sit back and go, okay, let's get as much information, and then I will, cast my opinion. If it's asked, I will cast my opinion on it. But right now, from what I understand, at least Mailloux is trying to have a path to redemption, where the Miller situation, I think it's there wasn't one there. I'm waiting for more information on it, because it just doesn't seem like there was one there.
And it doesn't seem like it adds up at all. Like, especially the I think Isaiah threw out kind of a letter to the media the other day, kind of stating his side of how that apology, and it just came off. And again, we're reading it in the tone that we believe it's being said, and it just, to me, I read it as kind of, a half-ass apology or come on, like do me a solid.
Hey,
More,
I'm doing this because I want to sign a contract.
yeah,
Like, it's
exactly.
yeah,
not like,
yeah. And
I'm sorry, but like I'm 51 years old. I have a son who's 5. I've got a daughter who's 9. I'm in a situation where I all I know is I'm trying to give them the best education I can as far as growing up the right way.
mhm,
But I know if my son did that, like where's this guy's parents?
mhm,
Where's
right.
like where like that's what kind of disappoints me. Is like my kid, if I found out he ever did that, I would grab him by the scruff of the neck. I would drive him over to the victim's house and try and talk to them and say, this kid needs to apologize immediately. Like there has to be again, I don't know what path they choose for redemption, but it just didn't seem, again, I want more information. I don't want to just weigh in shooting from the hip, but it just didn't seem as, if genuine's the right word, or there wasn't enough work there.
mhm.
Like I just know how I would feel as a parent, and if that happened to my child, I'd be pissed.
And I love that Isaiah called him out with the, show me proof. Show me, you're saying that you're doing this, you're working with the community, you're trying to make amends, you're trying to be a better person, and just called him out because there's so many. And I feel like, kind of going back to the Mayu thing, whenever, you're going to do this course, he's going to do this, he's going to work with these people. And it was almost like, show us that, he's actually doing something. And when Mitchell wasn't able to produce something, that's when Isaiah, at least from the sound of the letter and his version of it, kind of said, we're not friends. There's no path so far for us to make amends. And I love that he did that. I love that he called him out, because I feel like for being bullied at all times and kind of being the victim, I feel like that moment right there put him back in the driver's seat of, this is my time now. I'm going to drive how I want this to end.
Which is, it's his right to do that. Again, I would, it would be interesting to see. I always, and I try to give, the benefit of the doubt to people. And not that I'm giving it to Mitchell Miller here, because I think he has to earn it.
Yeah.
But I would like to see what has been done and what the plan was to try and become a better person. So I'm going to sit back and watch. And I know people say hockey's a right, all of that, but let's just remove hockey from the situation. How about just being a good person and living in society? So I see a lot of people on Twitter like, you could never play in the NHL. So does that make you so you can go and work where, Ed? Yeah. Because whoever hires him he's got this attached to his record. So is it all right for him to go work at a construction site but not play in the NHL? For me, the people at the construction site would be like, are you a good person? Are you like, to me, I think there has to be a bigger picture when it comes to him involved. I agree, hockey's a right and it's a privilege, all of that type of stuff. But I want to see him, do this for the victim and do this for himself to become a better person. It just doesn't sound like the work has been put in yet. I'm hoping that he does, and maybe something comes out of it. I'm a big believer in education and learning. I'm still learning at 51 years old. I think I'm a better person at 51 than I was at 40, than I was at 30, at 20, all of that type of stuff. It doesn't mean I'm perfect. I've made mistakes, and I would want to learn from them, and I hope he learns from them.
Yeah, and that's a conversation Justin and I had about, take hockey out of it, and regardless of what profession he'd be going into, some education, something has to come from this, and hopefully it's good where he is able to make amends with Isaiah, and he's able to redeem himself, in the eyes of Isaiah. And I'm not saying they're ever going to be friends, but some good comes from it where there is some healing on both sides. So I'm hoping to see something come out of the steps they're taking, whether that's with the Bruins, the NHL, or just personally to it's another example of, shining light on such a delicate subject that there needs to be some good that comes from this.
I agree. I think the proper wording is shining a light on things that, are not acceptable.
No, difficult conversation topics.
And they are hard conversations, but they're also, to me, you're trying to clean up a sport, but you're trying to clean up society. This isn't just, I tell people this all the time. This isn't just reserved for hockey. This happens every day in life, whether it's, banks, law firms, accounting firms, and that. There are things that are unacceptable that you're trying to clean up. And I think what happens is you get people that, have the courage to step up and say, hey, this is not right. So when I hear things that are being called out, or you're trying to help the process along, I think I like the wording. It's shining a light on things that are definitely wrong.
All right. We'll move on to something a little bit lighter. So Crosby and Ovechkin were asked about their ideal line mates. Crosby chooses Lemieux, obviously. Ovi chooses Brashear, which is to protect the two of them. Now, as a goalie, if you could choose any two defensemen to play in front of you, who are you picking?
I mean, if you look at my record, I played in 1990, late 90s in St. Louis behind Pronger and McInnes. Probably, that's not a bad tandem there. And coincidentally, myself and Roman Turek won the Jennings that year. So, my name's not on the Jennings because I didn't qualify, didn't play enough. I think I played 19 games that year, and you need to have 25. But Pronger and McInnes isn't far off. I mean, I would say Pronger and Niedermayer, that's what won a cup in Anaheim. Pronger and Lidstrom. Obviously, the one constant is Pronger because he's a close friend of mine, and I thought he was one of the most feared, dominant defensemen for several years.
Oh, absolutely.
If you look at there's a crazy stat. So St. Louis, I think, made the playoffs 26 years in a row. He gets traded to Edmonton. They miss the playoffs the next year. He goes to Edmonton. He takes them to the Cup final and then gets traded to Anaheim. Edmonton misses the playoffs the next year. Takes Anaheim to the Cup. Him and Niedermayer, they win the Cup. Then he ends up in Philadelphia, takes them to the finals, and then retires, and they miss the playoffs the next year. And Anaheim, after they won the Cup, I think they missed the playoffs. So it's this crazy stat as to how effective he was. He was one of the best defensemen I've ever seen, and was lucky enough to play with him and consider him a close friend. But I think there's some combination of Lidstrom, Niedermayer, Pronger from my generation. And I mean, McInnes was a bit older. I loved Al too, but Al's 10 years older than Chris, I believe. So it was, but man, oh man, those there's some pretty good pickings there from when I played.
In my head, I tried to predict what you were going to say, and I had Niedermayer and Pronger in my head.
I thought Lidstrom for sure. I don't think the guy you ever.
Lidstrom was so dominant too. He played on a team that had 7 Hall of Famers on that team. And in St. Louis, I played in the late 90s with Grant Fuhr, Brett Hull, Chris Pronger, Al McInnes, Pierre Turgeon, Pavel Demitra. We had a hell of a team.
Yeah.
So, and a bunch of those guys are Hall of Famers or close to it. A guy like Turgeon is arguably borderline Hall of Famer type of thing. So, Pronger and Niedermayer would be right there. Pronger, Lidstrom type of thing for sure.
So as Justin was talking about Ovi and Crosby, I'm just impressed that they've been able to keep pace so far. Getting older, you've seen. I don't want to pick on somebody. You played with the guy, and I've only heard good things. But Jerome McGinley, as he got older, started to slow down. Other than Crosby and Ovi, Bergeron, I think, is the only other guy I can think of where he's shown little regression in their game. And I don't know if that speaks to their training or this era or what, but I'm just blown away how they're both still in that top echelon of players in this league.
And you're right. And, Crosby, I think, is a year younger than Ovi, but it's more about them contributing in different ways. So Ovi's a bull in a china shop. The other day he didn't score against Pittsburgh, but he took out 2 of their defensemen, like literally ran through the boards. Crosby is such a hardworking individual. He's a hardworking superstar. And you're right, there is sometimes as you get older, there's a drop off, but then, there's outliers. And I think those two, because they're so special, they're outliers. I look at a guy like Joe Pavelski, his game is still a very high level at a later stage age. And Marc-Andre Fleury had a slow start in Minnesota, but his game is starting to round into shape. Like special players, and I know Iggy near the end, he had the bad hips. And he retired at 40, so like that, these guys still had a couple more years.
Yeah.
But you have to adapt your game when you're not 26 and get out of bed and just jump on and go play.
Mm-hmm.
These guys have been able. Now, Ovi, I think, is a freak because his game never had to adapt. He's a shooter. He uses his power. He can still skate, and he's 240 pounds. Whereas Crosby, I think his game has evolved, and he continues to grow it. So it's impressive. But that's why, these guys are generational players. These aren't just your superstars. These are, when you're talking Ovi and Sid, those are generational players that are arguably, top 10 of all time. And we're talking in the history of the game. So it's impressive what they've been able to do and continue to do for sure.
All right, now we're going to talk about another player past his prime, but still producing like he did when he was younger, Erik Karlsson. He's got 10 goals so far, 22 points, 8th in points in the league, 6th in goals league-wide, obviously first among defensemen for both. He's obviously on pace to beat his point total for the last 2 years. What do you think's the reason for that?
2 things. Health. Because when Erik Karlsson, you think back to 2017, that run that Ottawa went on, arguably he was the 3rd best player in the world. Like you had, whatever, Sid and I don't know if it was McDavid. I can't remember who was right there, but I remember having this conversation. It was like Karlsson is that freakish, like that good. I remember that saucer pass, I think it was against Boston from the far end to Mike Hoffman. Hoffman went in on the breakaway. Like I watched that every night because I was calling games in Ottawa. He was so dominant. And I don't think his health has been there for the last couple of years. So he looks healthy. So that's number 1. He looks like he's skating again. And that was his best attribute, is his skating, because he could skate himself into position, walk the line, his edge work, all of that. Secondly, is Brent Burns isn't there. So Brent Burns chewing up a lot of shooting on the power play, first power play minutes, hard minutes in certain situations. What they did is they took away, those 2 did it by committee. Now they were like, you're the guy. We're paying you at $11.5 million. Go out there and be an $11.5 million defenseman. Mm-hmm. Whereas him and Burns were kind of absorbing, imagine having that type of options and go, well, it's not Burns, just throw Karlsson out there. Okay, now throw Burns. That's, maybe a worse comparison is like Niedermeyer Pronger. You've got 2 like rock star defensemen, and then you throw Vlasic under there when Vlasic was in his prime. But you take Burns out of the lineup, all of a sudden Karlsson the guy. So he gets first power play. He's over the boards every time. So now everything runs through him, whereas before he split that with Burns.
Yeah,
so I think now all of a sudden he's the guy, and he's showing why he's the guy. Put it that way.
Well, for sure. I mean, he go from being a quarterback of the puck went through him at all times. He was playing crazy minutes in Ottawa. To then, like you said, splitting that time with Brent Burns. And I found it strange at that time of the San Jose trade. Like, you already have Brent Burns. Like, you never have too many talented guys, but like players of that type that need the puck on their stick, that need to be that quarterback, like you don't need 2 of those guys. And
I think what happened is, personally, I don't know if Doug Wilson was thinking, okay, Burns is a lot older. He's 37 now. They're like, he's going to drop off and Carlson will just take over. So, in maybe a 2-year span, you're going to have two of these guys, and then Carlson will take over. Burns will, kind of fade into the background. And that hasn't been the case. If anything, you talk about guys who are, respectfully freaks of nature. A guy like Brent Burns has gotten to Carolina, and he's just as dominant as ever. So a change of scenery has helped Burns, and taking Burns away from Carlson has helped Carlson. So it's kind of worked out for both of them.
Speaking of a former San Jose Shark, Evander Kane just can't seem to catch a break no matter what he does, whether it's on the ice or off the ice. It looked like he was finally getting his shit together at Edmonton, looking good, putting up points, last year in the playoffs, re-signs. He's looked good so far, and then gets this absolutely gruesome injury that's going to put him out until like February.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know whether I should feel bad for him or like, some type of karma catching up to him. Like, I just feel like he's always in the news for one reason or another.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at Evander Kane, the hockey player. I think there was a stat the other day I thought I read where it's like he scored 40 goals in 80 games for Edmonton, which is, you do that over a season. Like, you're a 40 goal scorer.
Mm-hmm.
He has been the perfect complement to that organization because he's a unicorn. And what I mean by that is it's rare to have a guy who can put up, let's just say he's a 30 goal scorer.
Yeah.
For argument's sake. It's rare that you can have a 30 goal scorer, 70-point guy, we'll call it, maybe more, maybe less, but in that range, who can fight, who's intimidating, who can skate, who can hit. Like he is a prototypical power forward that plays in a top line role.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see guys who can fight, you see guys who have maybe one dynamic of him. They're never on the ice against the top players. They're hidden on the third and fourth line because maybe they don't skate as well. They don't, they're deemed, hey, that matchup would be less if we had that person on the ice.
Mm-hmm.
Evander Kane is legitimately a top line left winger who brings a different dynamic to the ice. So all of a sudden, Connor McDavid, nobody's messing with him because if you're on the ice with McDavid, he's either going to light you up, so you're going to have your best players against him trying to shut him down, and you go near him, like Kane's in every scrum. So it's, to me, he's a really important piece. You look at their playoff success against Calgary, Kane really neutralized a lot of Calgary's toughness because, and then, he had I was at the game where he had the hat trick in Edmonton. I mean, his body of work alone in Edmonton has shown his value to that team, regardless of what you believe, the trouble off the ice, allegedly, all of that other stuff. What he's done or been able to do in, we'll call it, a calendar year or 80 games, just what he's done with the Oilers is exactly why they signed him. And a lot of teams wanted in on him is because it's rare that top six players are that type of dynamic of a player where they have a bite to them and can fight and also can back it up with points and play in every situation. So, it was a scary injury. You wish him all the best. Edmonton is a worse, like a team that's a notch down because of it. Like they're not going to replace it. I saw them. They put Holloway there the other day. They had Warren Foegele there, who scored a nice goal with the Draisaitl. But you're not replacing Kane. What you're trying to do is by committee to give a couple guys chances in that situation on that left side. So yeah, it's you never want to see. And I don't know if you heard it on the mic, him yelling for help and stuff. That was it's not good.
Oh, it's scary. The only other time I felt like my stomach dropped like that watching hockey was probably that Max Pacioretty hit that he received from Zdeno Chara, 10 years ago.
Pressured off.
Like that was scary for me watching that, where it's just like, is he dead? But
there's been a few of them. Like there's been, over the last 20 years, been, Taylor Hall got his face skated over in Columbus that night in warm up and took a bunch of stitches. You've seen some scary injuries. Even John Tavares in the playoffs a couple of years ago.
Yeah, true. Corey Perry, yeah.
Corey Perry, like that collision. You just never want to see somebody not, like the fear in their face. You could see that they were concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the humility side of hockey comes in. I mean, I told the story the other day. Chris Pronger took a slap shot in the heart in, I think, 1998. I mean, we were playing Detroit in the playoffs and collapsed. We thought he was dead. His heart skipped a beat, and
Jeez.
I mean, we were in a heated battle with Detroit, and the game just kind of shut down after that. Like, guys were in tears. Like, he got carted off. We weren't sure if he was alive or dead. And I mean, it was scary. So that's where the human side comes in, regardless of competition. Even Patty Maroon was yelling right away when he saw Kane,
Mm-hmm.
Skating off. Like, that's where you're concerned about somebody's health.
Yeah, no, it was definitely scary and left that sinking feeling in our stomach. But wish him all the best, and I hope. I love watching Edmonton games, that they're able to pull it out and kind of, like you said, by committee, clog that hole that's being left by him. We know you got to get going, so I want to thank you very much for coming on with us. I had a blast, and I mean, never did I think your answer in a DM or I think it was I messaged you on Cameo. Just shot in the dark. Very cool.
I gotta tell quickly. I don't know if you're putting this out there, but I've got a black eye, so I got a stick in the face last night, calling the Ottawa Islander game, and that's twice in 5 years I get chopped over the head in between the benches. I played 20 years of pro hockey, including junior. I think I've had like 3 concussions and some injuries along the way. It's like twice in the last 5 years in broadcasting, I'm like taking my life into my hands. So I apologize for the black eye, and I'm going to be on a panel tonight. So we're going to have some fun with it, but obviously I might wear some makeup, but I got to get an x-ray in about an hour and a half here to see if I got a little orbital thing going on, but
I hope there is no break. And, even though tough hockey was whenever you were playing the Stevens and the Prongers and that, just thank God you weren't playing against Makachuk.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't miss. That's the one thing I tell people all the time. I don't miss getting out of bed and being sore. And this morning I woke up and I was getting out of bed and I'm sore, and I'm like, I'm 51 years old. I'm too old for this nonsense.
Almost a PTSD of like having to go back to the rink and in fear of getting that sticker a puck shot at you.
Exactly. But thanks for having me, guys.
Well, thanks for being on the show.
And, absolutely. We'll chat soon.
All right. Thanks, Jamie. Take care.
Have a good one.
You too. Take care, guys.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
And now we move on to the lightning round. I'm going to ask Joel 3 questions. He has 3 minutes total, 1 minute per question. We're going to get right into it. All right, Joel. First question. Talk about the Seattle Kraken. Absolutely on fire. Better record than we expected. Everybody's kind of producing. What do you think? Think this is the real deal, or do you think they're just overperforming?
That is a good question. And episode 1 we discussed what our predictions were. You had Seattle getting into the playoffs.
I did.
Less than 20 games in, but you're looking pretty good right now. I still think it is a little early. I think they're playing a little over their heads. I think there's teams, like Seattle, Chicago, Detroit, Montreal, to name a few, that are punching a little above their weight class right now in what's expected of them. I do think things will start to even out. I think the Vancouver Canucks will bounce back. Calgary Flames will get out of their slump. I think Ottawa's better than what they have been so far. You can add Philly to the teams that are punching a little above their weight class. So I do think Seattle fits in that category, and I think they're going to come back down to earth. Good for Martin Jones, a bounce back year, but no, I think they're still going to miss playoffs.
All right. We'll have to see. Second question. So there was 3 suspensions recently. Slavkovsky hit on Luff, Anderson hit on Pietrangelo, Obe Kubel hit on Foot, and then Konechny hits Chabot right on the numbers, right into the boards. Nothing. What do you think?
I mean, it's tough to see hits, especially the Sikorsky and the Anderson hits, which are different part of the ice and, different vulnerability, but both hits that are in the numbers, be suspended each for 2 games. The Luff ending up in an injury that has him out long term. Pietrangelo ended up being fine. But to see that Thomas Chabot is out for, at least a week with a concussion, the fact that Konechny, similar hit, right in the numbers, along the boards, didn't get anything. I feel like fairness isn't always sameness, but you need to be consistent, and to me, that's at least 1 game, if not 2, like the others. The hit on foot from Obey Kubel that you mentioned is, very different. I was surprised he didn't get more than 5, just because of, to me, the main point of contact was the head, was an open ice hit. I don't think Foot was expecting it. Not to say that any of the players that have received hits that were suspendable expected it, but to me that was a little more severe than the rest.
It's time to wrap it up there, Joel.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Definitely suspendable at least 2 games.
All right, third question. Chris Neal is getting his jersey retired. Not a type of player you see get a jersey retired very often or at all. If you could retire any jersey from any player, who are you picking?
Good question. I think Neal's getting his jersey retired because of what he brought to the Senators, not necessarily the type of player he is. Just thinking about, the type of player that deserves to have their jersey lifted to the rafters. Like, being a Montreal fan, there's already so many numbers retired. I'm not sure if I would go with a Montreal player just because of the amount of jerseys already retired there. So just thinking of another organization, oh God, that's tough. That's a tough question. You know what? I think Buffalo with Danny Briere. I think Danny Briere
I like that.
did a lot for Buffalo. I think he deserved to have his jersey retired there.
I think that's a good choice, Joel. I think that's a good choice. All right. And now we move on to the final segment. Probably the most fun for Joel. Blunder of the week. And this one's fairly easy. It was an easy choice. Not a lot of discussion needed to choose this one. Matthew Tkachuk.
Well, like Jamie and I were joking at earlier about his black eye, thank God he wasn't playing with Matthew Tkachuk. He decided completely unnecessary, to kind of put the blade of his stick in Jonathan Quick's mask right near his eye. Why? Like, you're already an agitator. You already have that, target on your back throughout the league of being this dirty player, and you do something like that. Be better. There's no need for that. I have you in fantasy hockey. You lost me out on 2 games this week. I was pretty pissed. You're a good player. You don't need to be doing stuff like that. Nobody needs to be doing stuff like that. What happens if you get him in the eye, he loses that eye? Like, why? Like, it's so unnecessary, and I get getting under people's skin, and, if the puck's, under his glove and he's trying to freeze it, or, the puck's in the crease and he's not covering it and it's by his legs, taking a little whack or trying to poke at it, but play's dead, puck's nowhere near his face. Why are you doing that? It's just unnecessary. It's stupid. It hurts your team. Makes you look like an ass.
It's basically intent to injure.
Intent to injure, 100%. And, I'm surprised. I think he could have got more than 2 games based on what he did. And I think, obviously, being a repeat offender of certain incidences, not necessarily something like this, but I do think just completely unnecessary. And it's not needed in the game. You can be an agitator without being an asshole. Matthew, I still like you. You'll still be on my fantasy team, but just be better. Be like your brother. Hit, go to the front of the net, put up some points, be intimidating. Don't be an asshole.
All right. Well, that wraps up this week's episode of Average Jocks Hockey Podcast. This is our first video episode, so don't mind.
Yeah, we have faces for radio, but we've been asked to do some video. So, comment. Let us know what you think. If there's anything we need to work on video-wise, there's not much we can do for face here in Canada. Plastic surgery is not covered by our medical system.
I mean, we could try makeup, but I don't know, like more like clowns than anything.
Yeah. But next week, very excited. We have former Sportsnet host and former Fan 590 in Toronto host Jim Lang, also co-author of a couple books with one of my hockey heroes, Bob McKenzie. He also co-authored Brian Berard's book. So we're very excited to have Jim Lang on. Just want to give a shout out to my friend Reggie Latulippe for setting that up. So again, very excited to have Jim Lang on. Thanks to Jamie McLennan, and thanks to all of you for tuning in, and we will see you guys next week.